At this time of the year, most questions I get around fantasy football are focused on the 2024 fantasy draft season and how it might be different from what we saw in 2023. And with that in mind, I realized that I needed to get to work, so I started drafting. And based on that research, I noticed 3 significant trends, one of which blew my mind. Now, before we dive in, just a couple of notes. I used Underdog and used real money drafts for this because it's hard to find mock drafts at this time of the year. Plus, real money ensures that people finish the draft. They're also more likely to be trying to deploy a strategy that can win. And then finally, Underdog has already had 1,400 drafts completed, so that gives me a broader data set to compare my results with. So let's dive into the first trend that I noticed, and that was the fact that drafters are more willing to let quarterbacks go by in the early rounds. We have less of them going in round 2 and round 3 than what we saw from last year. Josh Allen still going in that round 2 range, but you can wait until as late as round 6 and still get your hands on a very high quality quarterback. And even after that, you still have access to really good options. Now, I wanted to go ahead and contrast what I was seeing in my drafts with the 1,400 plus Underdog drafts that have already occurred, and that trend did hold true. The top 8 quarterbacks are going 6.9 picks later than where they went in 2023. Another really big thing in play here is the fact that drafters hit in a huge way on late round quarterbacks in 2023. If you drafted Jordan Love, you took him as the QB 21, he finished as the quarterback 5. You drafted Brock Purdy, you got him at QB 24, finished the season as the QB 6. And then finally, CJ Stroud, you drafted as the QB 26, and he finished the season as the quarterback 7. The trickle-down impact of this is really twofold. First of all, we've got 3 young quarterbacks that are now considered to be replenishments for the quarterback draft pool. And that changes the way you think about trade-off costs. I could take Josh Allen in round 2, or I can wait until round 6 and get a guy like CJ Stroud that still has massive potential to grow, and I get to save 4 rounds in draft value. So those are things that people are thinking about. The second thing is it also reinforced the idea, whether it's true or not, that you can wait and still draft a really good quarterback or pick them up off of the waiver wire. So the bottom line from all of this is because your opponents are waiting on quarterback, you can also wait on quarterback. If you want to have a really good one, you don't have to pull the trigger in round 2 on Josh Allen. He's a fine option in round 2. But in round 3, we've got Jalen Hurts and we've got Lamar Jackson. Hurts was a round 2 pick last year. You've got Kellen Moore coming to the Eagles. They're going to throw the ball more. He has 3 elite passing options and going to A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, or Dallas Goedert. And we know he's always a threat to score double-digit rushing touchdowns. Oh, you don't want to do that? Well, in round 4, you could take Patrick Mahomes. The last time we saw Patrick Mahomes in 2022 as a round 4 quarterback, he finished as the QB1. Yes, the Chiefs have some work to do on their offense, but Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. Round 5, late in that round, you can get CJ Stroud. We already talked about him. And then finally, in round 6, there's Justin Fields, gives you the dual threat upside. We'll have to see where he lands based on what happens in the draft if there is a trade. And then we also have Dak Prescott coming off of a huge season. And Anthony Richardson, that one kind of surprised me. Drafters are not forgetting how good he was. He only had 2 full games, but he averaged 25 points in those games, and he has that elite dual threat upside that we're looking for. And maybe you don't want to spend one of your first 6 picks on a quarterback, depending on what falls to you, and that's okay too. Because if you look at rounds 7 through 9, there are plenty of good options, but one thing to note here about these players, although we saw the top 8 quarterbacks slip in average draft position, drafters are not wanting to wait too long. Quarterbacks 9 through 13 are actually going almost 11 spots higher than they went last season. Now, before we get to the final trend, which might leave some of you scratching your head, we've got to cover the second trend that I uncovered, and that's the fact that running backs are hip again, but it gets dangerous really quickly. If you look at the top 12 backs, they're going 2.3 picks ahead of where they went a season ago. And this is something that I saw in the drafts that I did as well. But I have to tell you, while I was very comfortable clicking on most of the players in the first round, as you get into rounds 2 and rounds 3, I think there are a lot of landmines here. So let's break down those round one running backs. And I am pretty comfortable, like I said, with all of these. CMC leads off the pack, getting a little older, but great utilization, great offense. Not a lot to talk about there. But in the middle of round one, Breece Hall going at 1.6. I was happy to click on Hall in some of my drafts. If you go from week 6 on, when they gave him that full-time role, handled 66% of the rushing attempts and also a 19% target share. That is very rare, a 28% targets per route run. He is the closest thing from Christian McCaffrey if the Jets offense can take a step forward. The next we have Bijan Robinson. Yeah, he didn't live up to expectations last season, but we no longer have Arthur Smith. We have Zach Robinson coming over from the Sean McVay tree of coaching, and they have been more willing to focus in on one running back. I think Robinson stabilizes the Falcons' skill position players, Bijan Robinson being one of those. And then we have Jahmyr Gibbs, and from week 10 on, once David Montgomery came back to the lineup, those two guys splitting, it was really like the old Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara show, which Dan Campbell had a front seat for a few years, and we had Gibbs averaging 16.7 fantasy points per game. You can imagine what it would be like if he gets a little bit more work in his second season. And then finally, Kyren Williams. Yes, he came out of nowhere, but again, back to that Sean McVay coaching tree, and as long as they don't draft someone as competition or spend significant capital in free agency to get another back, I really like Kyren in this situation. He had the closest utilization profile to CMC out of all running backs in fantasy in 2023. So now let's turn our attention to rounds 2 and 3, and this is where I felt more of a disconnect with what's going on in the marketplace with these running backs getting pushed up. I found myself mostly wanting to skip over these names at their cost. Jonathan Taylor as a high round 2 pick. This is a guy that didn't look as good last year. He's not involved in the passing game. Anthony Richardson's going to be scrambling and also stealing touchdowns inside the 5-yard line. Then we have Saquon Barkley, not as efficient as he used to be. Yeah, he can play on passing downs, but this is a guy getting up there in age, getting up there in touches. I think he could come through. I just don't like it at this price. Now, Devin Achane is a name that I did find myself taking in some of my drafts just because of that high-end upside we saw in a few of the games. If he somehow gets his hand on 45% of the Dolphins' backfield, he could easily be a top 3 running back. And then in round 3, we've got Isaiah Pacheco, who I like. He was actually pretty efficient, but it took an injury to Jerick McKinnon to unlock any work in the passing game. And even once he got it, hasn't been too consistent. So a pass-first offense, and he could just be the early down grinder. Not feeling it right now on Pacheco at that price. And then finally, Rachaad White, who was a deal in round 7 last year of drafts because a guy that we knew was going to get most of the workload, but he was not efficient. So we're looking at it now this year, same deal, probably not efficient, going to get most of the work, but his price tag is increased to round 3. So I would rather pivot to a name like a Jalen Hurts as an elite quarterback going in the middle of round 3. And now for our final trend, the trend that actually surprised me more than any other. And now look, I love rookie wide receivers, but I was not prepared for this. Rookie wide receivers are absolutely flying off the draft board. In fact, we could have a record season for the earliest rookie ever taken at wide receiver in fantasy football. NFL draft experts are predicting as many as 3 wide receivers to go in the first 10 picks of the NFL draft, and that has fantasy drafters very excited about their prospects. But there's one wide receiver that's getting more hype than any that I can remember, and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. Yes, the son of former Colt great Marvin Harrison. And the drafts that I participated in, he went from the middle of round 2 to the beginning of round 3. And it wasn't just the drafts for me. I went back and conferred with the rest of the data, and he's actually got an average draft position of round 2, pick 12. That would be a rookie beating Jamar Chase, who we were taking as early as round 4 as a rookie just a few years ago. Now, historically, I have loved targeting rookie wide receivers. In fact, I'm often more aggressive than other drafters with them, but they've still come at a discount, not having to spend a round 2 pick. This would be a record higher than what we spent on Jamar Chase as a round 4, round 5 pick just a few years ago. So I haven't done all of my analysis on Marvin Harrison Jr. I could change my mind on this one, but I'm very interested in what you guys have to say about Harrison. If you would be willing to pull the trigger at the end of round 2, early round 3 in your drafts. For now, I'm more comfortable with Malik Neighbors, who's going off the board as the wide receiver 27. That's slightly higher than what we saw from Jackson Smith and Jigba last year as the wide receiver 32. And I think Neighbors is probably a better prospect. Again, still have to do some more work there. And then finally, looking at Rome Odunze, and he's coming off the board as a mid-range wide receiver 3. So right now, for those high-end rookies, I'm probably thinking I want to focus more on those two players. Obviously, a lot could change between now and next draft season, but get ready, guys. You're going to have to spend early picks to get the rookie wide receivers.